The snow was falling softly on Millbrook Lane in Cedar Falls, Iowa, on December 24th, 1996. Christmas lights twinkled from every house on the quiet suburban street, casting colorful reflections on the fresh powder that had begun accumulating around dinner time. It was the kind of Christmas Eve that Norman Rockwell would have painted, peaceful, magical, and full of promise. At 1247 Millbrook Lane, the Henderson family home stood as the crown jewel of the neighborhood's holiday decorations. Margaret Henderson had spent weeks perfecting every detail. Garland wound around the white porch columns, wreaths hung in every window, and thousands of tiny white lights outlined the Victorian-style house's elegant roofline. The massive blue spruce in their front yard sparkled with ornaments that had been collected over 15 years of marriage. But it was the scene inside that truly captured the magic of Christmas Eve. Through the large bay window facing the street, neighbors could see the Henderson family's beautiful Christmas tree, a 7-foot Fraser fir that James Henderson had driven 3 hours to North Carolina to select personally. Margaret had decorated it with antique glass ornaments passed down from her grandmother, delicate silver tinsel that caught the light just perfectly, and a collection of handmade ornaments created by their 2 children over the years. Beneath the tree, carefully wrapped presents formed a colorful landscape of anticipation. Red boxes tied with gold ribbon sat next to green packages topped with silver bows. Each gift was meticulously tagged in Margaret's elegant handwriting, for Sarah, with love from Santa, for Tommy from Mom and Dad, for James, your favorite wife. James Henderson, 42 years old, worked as an insurance adjuster for Mutual of Iowa. He was known throughout Cedar Falls as a methodical man who paid attention to details, a trait that served him well in his profession. His neighbors described him as quiet but friendly, the type of man who always helped carry groceries for elderly Mrs. Patterson next door and who never failed to clear the snow from his sidewalk before city ordinances required it. Margaret Henderson, 39, taught 4th grade at Cedar Falls Elementary School. Her students adored her patient manner and creative lesson plans. She had a gift for making even the most reluctant learners excited about reading and arithmetic. During the Christmas season, her classroom was transformed into a winter wonderland, complete with paper snowflakes hanging from the ceiling and a reading corner decorated like Santa's workshop. Their daughter Sarah, 15, was a sophomore at Cedar Falls High School. She had inherited her mother's love of learning and her father's attention to detail. Sarah was the editor of the school newspaper, captain of the debate team, and maintained a perfect 4.0 grade point average. Her teachers predicted she would receive a full scholarship to any college of her choice. Tommy Henderson, 12, was in 7th grade and possessed an infectious enthusiasm for life that brightened every room he entered. He collected baseball cards with the passion of a museum curator, organized neighborhood games of football in Riverside Park, and had recently discovered a love for photography using an old camera his grandfather had given him. Tommy's bedroom walls were covered with black and white photographs he had developed in the makeshift darkroom James had helped him create in their basement. The Henderson family had established Christmas Eve traditions that had remained constant for years. Every December 24th, they attended the 7 o'clock service at Cedar Falls Methodist Church, where Margaret sang in the choir and James served as an usher. After church, they would return home for hot chocolate and Christmas cookies while listening to Bing Crosby records and admiring their tree. The children were allowed to open 1 present each, always new pajamas, before being sent to bed with promises that Santa would visit during the night. On this particular Christmas Eve, everything proceeded according to tradition. Reverend William Patterson later testified that the entire Henderson family attended the evening service. Margaret sang Silent Night with her usual beautiful soprano voice. James helped collect the offering and greeted parishioners at the door. Sarah and Tommy sat in the third row, sharing a hymnal and whispering quietly during the prayers. The service ended at 8:15. Several church members recalled speaking with the Hendersons in the parking lot afterward. Mary Catherine Wells, who taught alongside Margaret, remembered discussing plans for the upcoming New Year's Eve potluck dinner. Frank Rodriguez, James's bowling partner, mentioned that James seemed in excellent spirits and was looking forward to the 2 weeks of vacation time he had saved for the holidays. Dr. Patricia Coleman, the family's longtime physician, encountered the Hendersons as they were loading into their dark blue 1994 Ford Explorer. She later told police that all 4 family members appeared healthy, happy, and excited about Christmas morning. Tommy was chattering about the new bicycle he hoped to find under the tree, while Sarah was discussing her plans to sleep late during winter vacation. The Henderson family arrived home at approximately 8:45 that evening. Their next-door neighbor, Robert Kim, was in his garage organizing Christmas decorations when he heard car doors slam and cheerful voices calling out Merry Christmas across the yards. He waved back and noticed that every light in the Henderson house was on, creating a warm, golden glow that seemed to embody the spirit of the season. At 9:15, Martha Kowalski, who lived directly across the street, was closing her curtains when she observed the Henderson family through their bay window. She could see them gathered around their Christmas tree, and it appeared they were distributing the traditional Christmas Eve pajamas. Martha later described the scene as perfectly normal and exactly what you'd expect on Christmas Eve. This was the last confirmed sighting of the Henderson family alive. The next morning, December 25th, 1996, began with unseasonably warm weather that quickly melted the previous evening's snow. Church bells rang throughout Cedar Falls, calling faithful families to Christmas morning services. Children's laughter echoed from backyards where new bicycles and sleds were being tested for the first time. But at 12:47, Millbrook Lane, an eerie silence had settled over the Henderson house. Eleanor Patterson, the elderly woman who lived next door, became concerned around 10 o'clock that morning. Mrs. Patterson, 78 years old and sharp as a tack despite her age, had known the Henderson family since they moved to the neighborhood 15 years earlier. She had been expecting her traditional Christmas morning visit from Tommy, who always brought her a plate of Margaret's famous sugar cookies and stayed to hear stories about Christmases from her childhood during the Great Depression. When Tommy failed to appear by 10:30, Mrs. Patterson began to worry. She shuffled to her kitchen window, which provided a clear view of the Henderson driveway, and noticed that both family cars were still parked exactly where they had been the night before. The Ford Explorer sat beside James's white 1993 Honda Accord, both covered with a light coating of frost that indicated they hadn't been moved since the previous evening. More troubling was the complete absence of any signs of Christmas morning activity. Mrs. Patterson knew the Henderson family's routines intimately. By 10 o'clock on Christmas morning, James would typically be outside retrieving the newspaper and perhaps starting his car to warm it up for their traditional drive to visit Margaret's parents in Des Moines. Margaret would be visible through the kitchen window, preparing the elaborate Christmas brunch that had become legendary among their extended family. The children should have been playing in the backyard with their new gifts, or at the very least, visible through the windows as they explored their Christmas treasures. Instead, the house appeared completely still, as if frozen in time from the night before. Mrs. Patterson tried calling the Henderson house 3 times between 10:30 and 11 o'clock. Each time, the phone rang exactly 8 times before the answering machine picked up. James's voice, cheerful and warm, invited callers to leave a message for the Henderson family, promising they would return the call as soon as possible. Growing increasingly worried, Mrs. Patterson called her son Richard, who lived across town. Richard Patterson was a sergeant with the Cedar Falls Police Department and had known the Henderson family through his mother for many years. He assured Mrs. Patterson that there was probably a simple explanation. Perhaps the family had decided to leave early for Des Moines, or maybe they were so exhausted from Christmas Eve preparations that they were sleeping unusually late. But Mrs. Patterson's concerns proved to be well-founded. At 11:45 that Christmas morning, Richard Patterson arrived at his mother's house to investigate the situation personally. As a police officer with 12 years of experience, he had developed strong instincts about when something was genuinely wrong versus when worried citizens were overreacting to harmless situations. One look at the Henderson house told him this was not an overreaction. The Christmas lights that had been blazing so beautifully the night before were still on, creating an odd contrast with the bright Christmas morning sunshine. Every light in the house appeared to be illuminated, from the basement windows to the second-floor bedrooms. This was highly unusual for a family that was environmentally conscious and careful about electricity bills. Richard Patterson walked around the perimeter of the house, looking for any signs of the family's presence. The morning newspaper still lay in its plastic wrapper on the front walkway, undisturbed, despite the fact that James Henderson was known to retrieve it before 7 o'clock every morning. The mail slot in the front door was stuffed with Christmas cards that had been delivered on Christmas Eve, indicating that no one had collected the mail since the previous afternoon. Most unsettling was what Richard could see through the large bay window facing the street. The Henderson family's Christmas tree stood exactly as it had the night before, perfectly decorated and surrounded by wrapped presents. But something was wrong with the scene. Richard had to look carefully for several minutes before he realized what was troubling him about the image. None of the presents had been opened. Every single gift remained exactly as it had been arranged the previous evening. The carefully wrapped boxes sat in their precise positions, ribbons and bows intact, gift tags still attached. For a family with 2 children, including a 12-year-old boy who lived for Christmas morning, this was absolutely impossible. Richard Patterson knew that he was looking at evidence of something far more serious than a family sleeping late or leaving town unexpectedly. He returned to his mother's house and called the Cedar Falls Police Department, requesting immediate backup for a wellness check at 1247 Millbrook Lane. Within 10 minutes, 2 patrol cars had arrived on the quiet residential street, their red and blue lights creating an ominous contrast to the cheerful Christmas decorations adorning every house. Officers Michael Torres and Jennifer Walsh joined Sergeant Patterson in approaching the Henderson house. They rang the doorbell repeatedly and knocked loudly on both the front and back doors. They called out, identifying themselves as Cedar Falls Police and asking for any response from inside the house. Silence. The officers could hear the central heating system running inside the house, and the Christmas tree lights continued to twinkle through the window. But there were no sounds of human presence. No footsteps, no voices, no movement of any kind. At 12:30 that afternoon, after obtaining verbal permission from Police Chief Daniel Morrison, the officers made the decision to enter the Henderson house through the unlocked back door. What they found inside would baffle investigators for the next 28 years. The house was in perfect order, as if the family had simply vanished into thin air. In the living room, the Christmas tree stood exactly as neighbors had observed it the night before. 23 wrapped presents sat beneath its branches, completely undisturbed. Margaret's china coffee cups, which she had set out for Christmas morning, remained clean and unused on the kitchen counter. The special Christmas morning casserole she had prepared the day before sat in the refrigerator, ready to be baked, but never touched. Upstairs, the family's beds had been slept in, but not made, which was normal for Christmas morning. Sarah's room showed signs that she had been writing in her diary the night before. Her pink leather journal lay open on her desk, with an entry dated December 24th, 1996. The final line, written in her careful cursive handwriting, read, "Tomorrow is going to be the best Christmas ever." Tommy's room revealed that he had been organizing his baseball card collection before bed. Cards were spread across his desk in neat piles, separated by team and year. His new camera sat on his nightstand, loaded with film, and ready to capture Christmas morning memories that would never be made. In the master bedroom, Margaret's Christmas dress was laid out on the chair beside her vanity, selected for Christmas dinner with her parents. James's good suit hung on the closet door, pressed and ready for the formal family gathering they would never attend. Most puzzling was the evidence in the kitchen and bathrooms that suggested the family had begun their normal morning routines. James's electric razor was plugged in and sitting on the bathroom counter, still slightly warm to the touch. A coffee pot had been programmed the night before and had brewed automatically at 6 o'clock that morning, but the full pot sat untouched, filling the house with the rich aroma of Colombian blend. Margaret's makeup was partially laid out on her vanity, as if she'd been preparing to get ready for the day. Her lipstick tube sat uncapped beside her mirror, and her jewelry box was open with her pearl earrings, the ones she always wore to visit her parents, placed on the surface beside it. The investigators found no signs of struggle, no evidence of forced entry, no indication of violence or foul play. The house's security system had not been triggered, and all doors and windows were locked from the inside when police arrived, except for the back door, which the family routinely left unlocked during the day. All 4 family members had simply disappeared without a trace, leaving behind their home, their possessions, their Christmas presents, and their entire lives in Cedar Falls, Iowa. The initial investigation, led by Detective Captain Susan Reynolds, focused on the most logical explanations for the family's disappearance. Perhaps they had experienced a medical emergency and were taken to a hospital. Maybe they had received an urgent call from relatives and had left immediately to respond to a family crisis. But every lead proved to be a dead end. Hospitals throughout Iowa and surrounding states reported no Henderson family members among their patients. Margaret's parents in Des Moines had been expecting their daughter's family for Christmas dinner and were devastated to learn of their disappearance. James's brother in Minneapolis hadn't spoken to him since Thanksgiving and had no knowledge of any problems or plans for unexpected travel. The family's bank accounts remained untouched. Their credit cards showed no activity after December 23rd, when Margaret had purchased last-minute stocking stuffers at Kmart. Their cars remained in the driveway, keys hanging on the hook beside the kitchen door, exactly where James always left them. Most mysteriously, their luggage remained in the bedroom closets, and their winter coats hung undisturbed in the front hall closet. If the Henderson family had left their house on Christmas Eve or Christmas morning, they had done so wearing only the clothes on their backs, in December weather that ranged from 28 to 35 degrees Fahrenheit. The Cedar Falls Police Department launched the most comprehensive missing persons investigation in the city's history. Every friend, neighbor, colleague, and family member was interviewed extensively. The family's telephone records were analyzed for any unusual calls or communications. Their computers, Margaret had a desktop PC she used for lesson planning, and Sarah had received a laptop for her birthday earlier that year, were examined by FBI technicians who found nothing suspicious or concerning. Search teams combed the countryside surrounding Cedar Falls, looking for any trace of the missing family. Volunteers from the community joined professional search and rescue teams in exploring every abandoned building, wooded area, and body of water within a 50-mile radius of the city. The search efforts continued for 6 months, but no evidence of the Henderson family was ever discovered. As 1996 turned into 1997, the investigation gradually shifted from active search to cold case status. Detective Captain Reynolds, who had become personally invested in finding the Henderson family, continued working on the case even after her official retirement in 2003. She maintained detailed files and followed up on every tip, rumor, and potential lead that emerged over the years. Theories about the Henderson family's fate ranged from the plausible to the absurd. Some investigators believed the family had been victims of a carefully planned abduction, possibly related to James's work as an insurance adjuster, if he had inadvertently discovered evidence of fraud or other criminal activity. Others theorized that the family had entered witness protection, although the FBI denied any knowledge of such an arrangement. More exotic theories suggested everything from alien abduction to voluntary disappearance with new identities, though neither explanation accounted for the family's failure to take any possessions, money, or identification with them. The house at 1247 Millbrook Lane remained empty for nearly 2 years following the disappearance. Margaret's parents maintained the mortgage payments and utilities, hoping against hope that their daughter's family would somehow return. But by 1998, the financial burden became too great, and the house was sold to a young couple who had moved to Cedar Falls for new jobs at the local manufacturing plant. The Henderson family's possessions were carefully packed and stored in a climate-controlled facility, just in case they ever returned to claim them. The Christmas presents beneath the tree were left exactly as they had been found, still wrapped and tagged, a poignant reminder of the celebration that never came. Over the years, the Henderson disappearance became part of Cedar Falls folklore. Longtime residents would tell newcomers about the family that had vanished on Christmas Eve, and the case was featured in several true crime books and television programs. Despite the national attention and thousands of tips from across the country, no credible evidence ever emerged to explain what had happened to James, Margaret, Sarah, and Tommy Henderson. Mrs. Patterson lived until 2009, when she passed away at the age of 91. Until her final days, she maintained that she would never stop wondering what had become of the Henderson family. She often said that the silence from their house on Christmas morning 1996 was the most frightening sound she had ever experienced. The house on Millbrook Lane changed hands several more times over the years. Each family that lived there reported feeling uncomfortable during the Christmas season, though none could explain exactly why. Some mentioned hearing children's laughter from empty rooms, or catching glimpses of movement near the large bay window where the Henderson family's Christmas tree had once stood. By 2020, the house had been vacant for 3 years. The last family to live there, the Johnsons, had moved out abruptly in December 2017, telling neighbors only that they needed a fresh start somewhere else. The real estate listing mentioned that the house would be perfect for a family who appreciated vintage charm and didn't mind doing some renovation work. What the listing didn't mention was that every family who had lived in the house had left during the Christmas season. In 2021, the property was purchased by Heritage Properties, a company that specialized in renovating historic homes for resale. They had plans to completely modernize the interior while preserving the Victorian exterior that made the house a neighborhood landmark. The renovation work began in March 2022 and proceeded normally throughout the spring and summer. Workers reported no unusual incidents or experiences while updating the plumbing, electrical systems, and interior walls. The house seemed like any other old home that needed attention and investment to restore it to its former glory. But as Christmas 2022 approached, strange things began happening at 1247 Millbrook Lane. Construction workers reported that their tools would be mysteriously rearranged overnight, even though the house was securely locked and no evidence of break-ins was ever discovered. Paint cans that had been left half empty would be found completely full the next morning. Lumber that had been measured and cut for specific installations would somehow be the wrong dimensions when workers returned to complete their tasks. Most unsettling were the reports of Christmas music playing softly from inside the house, even though the electricity had been disconnected during the electrical system renovation. Multiple witnesses heard the faint strains of Silent Night and White Christmas drifting from the empty rooms, but whenever anyone investigated, the music would stop abruptly. The renovation project was completed in October 2023, but Heritage Properties had difficulty finding a buyer willing to purchase the house. Despite its beautiful restoration and competitive pricing, every potential buyer who toured the property during November and December 2023 decided not to make an offer. Several mentioned feeling unsettled or watched while viewing the house, though none could provide specific reasons for their discomfort. On December 15, 2024, exactly 28 years and 9 months after the Henderson family's disappearance, something extraordinary occurred at 1247 Millbrook Lane. Daniel Morrison, the former police chief who had overseen the initial investigation, was now 72 years old and suffering from early-stage Alzheimer's disease. His wife had died 2 years earlier, and he spent most of his days taking long walks through the neighborhoods where he had once served as the community's protector. On this particular evening, Morrison was walking past the Henderson house when something in the large bay window caught his attention. A Christmas tree stood in exactly the same position where the Henderson family's tree had been 28 years earlier. Daniel Morrison stood frozen on the sidewalk outside 1247 Millbrook Lane, his aging eyes struggling to process what he was seeing through the bay window. The December evening light was fading, but the interior of the house was clearly illuminated by warm, golden Christmas tree lights that shouldn't have been there. The tree was magnificent, a 7-foot Fraser fir decorated with antique glass ornaments that caught the light in familiar, mesmerizing patterns. Silver tinsel draped elegantly from branch to branch, and at the top, a delicate angel with gossamer wings spread her arms in eternal blessing. Most shocking of all, beneath the tree sat an arrangement of wrapped presents that looked exactly like the ones Morrison remembered from 28 years ago. Morrison's hands trembled as he pulled his cell phone from his coat pocket. His fingers, stiff with arthritis and cold, fumbled with the numbers as he dialed the Cedar Falls Police Department. Despite his memory problems, he could recall every detail of the Henderson case as if it had happened yesterday. Cedar Falls Police. This is Dispatcher Kelly Martinez speaking. This is Daniel Morrison, former police chief. I need officers at 1247 Millbrook Lane immediately. The Henderson house, there's something inside. 20 minutes later, 3 patrol cars had converged on Millbrook Lane. Current police chief Robert Kim, the same Robert Kim who had been the Hendersons' next-door neighbor in 1996, arrived to personally oversee what could be either a breakthrough in the city's most famous cold case or the confused imaginings of an elderly man with dementia. Officer Sarah Chen, a 10-year veteran of the force, was the first to confirm Morrison's observation. Chief, there's definitely a Christmas tree inside that house, and it's definitely lit up. The property management company swears they haven't been inside since October, and there's no electricity connected to the building. Chief Kim approached the bay window with a flashlight, though he hardly needed it. The Christmas tree lights provided more than enough illumination to see that the scene inside was both beautiful and impossible. The tree stood in precisely the same location where the Henderson family's tree had been placed 28 years earlier, decorated with ornaments that appeared identical to those described in the original police reports. Have we confirmed that Heritage Properties hasn't been staging the house for Christmas? Kim asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Officer Marcus Thompson had already contacted the property management company. I spoke with Janet Miller at Heritage Properties. She's adamant that no one from their company has been inside the house since the final inspection in October. She's on her way here now with keys and all the documentation. Kim studied the scene through the window more carefully. Something was bothering him about the arrangement of presents beneath the tree, but it took him several minutes to identify what seemed wrong. The wrapped boxes and gift bags appeared to be in constant, subtle motion, not dramatic movement, but a gentle shifting that suggested the presents were somehow breathing or floating in imperceptible currents of air. Chen, do you see anything unusual about those presents under the tree? Officer Chen pressed her face closer to the window and watched for 30 seconds before responding. Sir, this might sound crazy, but they look like they're moving. Very slightly, but definitely moving. Kim called for additional backup and contacted the county sheriff's department for assistance. Whatever was happening at 1247 Millbrook Lane, he wanted to ensure they had adequate personnel and expertise to handle it safely. Janet Miller arrived 45 minutes later, visibly shaken and clutching a thick folder of property documentation. She was a professional woman in her mid-50s who had been managing rental and sale properties for over 20 years, but she had never encountered anything like the situation unfolding on Millbrook Lane. Chief Kim, I can absolutely guarantee that no one from Heritage Properties has been inside that house since October 28th. We conducted our final inspection after the renovation work was completed, confirmed that all utilities were disconnected, and locked the property. I have the documentation right here. Miller produced photographs taken during the final inspection, showing empty rooms with freshly painted walls, new flooring, and updated fixtures. The living room where the Christmas tree now stood had been completely bare, with no furniture, decorations, or electrical connections that could power any kind of lighting. Who has keys to the property? Kim asked. Only myself and my assistant manager, plus one set that we keep in our office safe for emergency access. We've also had a security system monitoring the property since November 1st. If anyone had entered the house, we would have been notified immediately. Kim requested the security system logs, which Miller accessed through an app on her phone. The record showed no unauthorized entries, no triggered alarms, and no indication that anyone had been inside the house since the system was activated 6 weeks earlier. What about the utilities? You said electricity was disconnected, but obviously something is powering those Christmas lights. Miller contacted Iowa Electric directly from the scene. Customer service confirmed that electrical service to 1247 Millbrook Lane had been terminated on October 30th, 2023, and no reconnection requests had been submitted. According to their records, the property was consuming zero electricity and had no active service account. Yet the Christmas tree lights continued to twinkle merrily through the window, casting dancing shadows on the walls of the supposedly powerless house. Chief Kim made the decision to enter the property at 8:15 p.m., accompanied by Officers Chen and Thompson, EMT personnel, and a representative from the fire department's hazardous materials team. Janet Miller provided the keys and security codes, and the group approached the front door with a mixture of professional caution and personal curiosity. The house was silent as they entered, but warm air greeted them in the foyer, unusual for a building that had been without heat for nearly 2 months. The hardwood floors creaked familiarly under their feet as they moved through the updated interior toward the living room, where the Christmas tree awaited. What they found defied every rational explanation. The Fraser fir stood 8 feet tall, larger than it had appeared through the window, and was decorated with ornaments that seemed to glow with their own internal light. The glass balls reflected not just the Christmas tree lights, but images that moved and shifted like living memories. Officer Chen later described seeing what appeared to be scenes of children playing in the snow, families gathered around dinner tables, and parents tucking children into bed on Christmas Eve. The presents beneath the tree were indeed moving, though so slowly that the motion was almost hypnotic rather than alarming. Wrapped boxes shifted position by inches over the course of minutes, while gift bags swayed gently as if touched by invisible breezes. The movement was organic and purposeful, as if the presents were living things arranging themselves according to some unknown pattern. "Chief, you need to look at these gift tags," Officer Thompson called from beside the tree. Kim approached cautiously and examined the small cards attached to each present. Written in elegant cursive handwriting that matched the samples in the Henderson case files, the tags read, "For Sarah, with love from Santa," "For Tommy, from Mom and Dad," "For James, your favorite wife," and variations that perfectly matched the original Christmas presents from 1996. But there were new additions that made Kim's blood run cold. Several presents bore tags addressed to people who had been involved in the original investigation. For Detective Reynolds, who never stopped looking; for Chief Morrison, who remembers everything, and most unsettling, for Chief Kim, the boy next door who finally came home. "Sir, we need to photograph everything before we disturb anything," Officer Chen advised, though her voice betrayed her own unease at the impossible scene before them. As crime scene photographer Lisa Park documented every angle of the Christmas tree and presents, she noticed something that the officers had missed. Hidden among the traditional wrapped gifts were several items that appeared to be much newer than 28 years old. A small digital camera sat partially concealed behind a large red box. The camera's LED display showed it was powered on and actively recording. Beside it lay a composition notebook with Sarah's Journal, 2024, written on the cover in the same handwriting they had found in Sarah Henderson's 1996 diary. Officer Thompson used evidence gloves to carefully open the notebook. The pages contained diary entries dated from December 1st through December 15th, 2024, written in Sarah Henderson's handwriting, despite the fact that she would now be 43 years old if she was still alive. The entries described daily activities that seemed both mundane and impossible. December 3rd, 2024. Tommy is excited about his new camera equipment. He's been practicing with different lenses and says he wants to become a professional photographer. Mum is helping him convert the basement into a proper darkroom. Dad thinks it's wonderful that Tommy has found something he's so passionate about. December 8th, 2024. We went Christmas shopping today at Valley West Mall. It's so different from how I remember it, but also exactly the same. Mum found the perfect gift for Dad, a vintage watch that looks just like the one Grandpa used to wear. Tommy bought presents for everyone with money he earned from selling some of his photographs. December 12th, 2024. I've been thinking about time a lot lately, how it moves differently for different people, how some moments last forever while others pass too quickly. I wonder if the people who used to live in our house ever think about us. I hope they know we're happy here. December 15th, 2024. Tonight we're going to decorate the Christmas tree. Dad picked out a beautiful Fraser fir, just like always. Mom has all her grandmother's ornaments ready, and Tommy has been making new ones in art class. I can't wait to see how it looks when we're finished. Tomorrow we'll start putting presents underneath. Kim felt a chill that had nothing to do with the December weather. The diary entry suggested that Sarah Henderson was not only alive, but living in this house and experiencing a version of Christmas 2024 that somehow existed parallel to the reality everyone else was experiencing. "Chief, I think you should see this," Officer Chen called from the kitchen. The kitchen showed signs of recent use that contradicted everything they knew about the property's vacant status. Fresh coffee sat in a pot that was somehow still warm, despite the lack of electrical service. 4 place settings were arranged on the dining table, complete with Margaret Henderson's good china that had been photographed and catalogued as missing evidence 28 years ago. A handwritten note lay beside one of the plates, written in what appeared to be Margaret's distinctive penmanship. "Gone to pick up last-minute items for Christmas dinner. Back soon. Don't let the coffee get cold. Love, Mom. The note was dated December 15, 2024. In the refrigerator, they found food that appeared fresh despite the fact that the appliance should have been without power for weeks. A Christmas casserole identical to the one Margaret had prepared in 1996 sat covered with aluminum foil. A note attached read, "For Christmas morning, heat at 350 degrees for 45 minutes." Upstairs, the bedrooms showed signs of current occupation. Sarah's room contained textbooks from Cedar Falls High School with 2024 copyright dates, along with homework assignments and test papers marked with current dates and grades. Her laptop computer, a model that didn't exist in 1996, sat open on her desk with the screen displaying a college application essay titled, "What Home Means to Me." Tommy's room revealed his continued passion for photography, but with equipment that reflected nearly 3 decades of technological advancement. Digital cameras, professional lighting equipment, and a computer setup for photo editing suggested that his interests had evolved and grown over the years that should have passed. The most disturbing discovery was in the master bedroom, where James and Margaret's belongings appeared to show natural aging and wear that indicated 28 years of use. James's reading glasses prescription had been updated multiple times based on receipts found in his nightstand drawer dated throughout the 2000s, 2010s, and into 2024. Margaret's jewelry showed the kind of gradual accumulation that comes from years of gift-giving and personal purchases. "This is impossible," Officer Thompson whispered as he examined a family photograph on Margaret's vanity. The picture showed the Henderson family gathered around a Christmas tree, but they appeared as they would in 2024. James with grey hair and reading glasses, Margaret with laugh lines around her eyes, Sarah as a woman in her 40s, and Tommy as a man in his 30s. The photograph was dated December 2023. Chief Kim ordered the house to be sealed as a crime scene, though no crime had been committed that anyone could identify. The impossibility of the situation demanded investigation, but traditional police procedures seemed inadequate for dealing with evidence that defied the basic laws of physics and time. Dr. Amanda Foster, a professor of physics at the University of Iowa, arrived at midnight to examine the electrical anomalies in the house. Using sophisticated testing equipment, she confirmed that no electrical current was flowing to the property, yet electromagnetic readings throughout the house showed patterns she had never encountered in 20 years of research. "The energy signatures I'm detecting don't match any known power source," Dr. Foster explained to Chief Kim. "The Christmas tree lights are clearly operating, but they're not drawing electricity from any conventional source. If I had to guess, I'd say they're powered by something that exists outside our normal understanding of energy and matter." Paranormal investigator Marcus Webb, who had written extensively about the Henderson disappearance, arrived from Des Moines at Chief Kim's request. Webb had investigated hundreds of supposedly supernatural events over his 30-year career, and he approached the Millbrook Lane situation with professional skepticism tempered by genuine scientific curiosity. "I've never encountered anything quite like this," Webb admitted after spending 2 hours documenting the scene with specialized equipment. "The evidence suggests that the Henderson family is somehow continuing to live their lives in this house, but in a temporal bubble that exists parallel to our timeline. They appear to be experiencing the passage of time normally, but in a reality that's separate from ours." By 3 a.m., word of the situation had reached local media outlets, and news vans began arriving on Millbrook Lane despite Chief Kim's attempts to maintain discretion. The story was too extraordinary to contain, and by dawn, national news networks were requesting interviews and access to what was being called the Christmas Miracle House. Dr. Rebecca Sanderson, a clinical psychologist who specialized in trauma and memory disorders, suggested an alternative explanation that was only slightly less unsettling than the supernatural theories being proposed. What if the Henderson family never actually left? Dr. Sanderson proposed during a consultation with the investigation team. What if something happened to them on Christmas Eve 1996 that caused them to become trapped in a dissociative state where they continue to experience their lives as if time hasn't passed? The physical evidence we're seeing could be manifestations of a shared psychological reality that exists only within the confines of this house. Indeed, the theory was intriguing, but failed to explain the physical impossibilities they had documented. The functioning electrical devices without power, the fresh food in an unpowered refrigerator, or the presence that moved independently under careful observation. Father Michael Torres from Cedar Falls Methodist Church arrived at dawn to bless the house and offer prayers for the Henderson family wherever they might be. As a man of faith who had spent his career counseling families through impossible losses, he offered a different perspective on the mystery. Perhaps we are not meant to understand everything that happens in this world, Father Torres suggested. Sometimes the most important thing is simply to witness and to hope. If the Henderson family has somehow found a way to continue their Christmas Eve celebration, maybe our role isn't to solve the mystery, but to honor their love and their faith in the power of family traditions. As December 16th dawned over Cedar Falls, the investigation had produced more questions than answers. The Henderson house contained undeniable evidence that the missing family was somehow present and living normal lives, but in a reality that existed separately from the world everyone else inhabited. Media attention continued to intensify throughout the day. Reporters from across the country descended on the small Iowa town, interviewing neighbors, former classmates of Sarah and Tommy, and anyone who had known the Henderson family. The story captured national imagination as people struggled to understand how a family could vanish for 28 years and then return to celebrate Christmas as if no time had passed. Mrs. Eleanor Patterson's nephew, David Patterson, drove from Chicago to visit the house where his aunt had spent her final years wondering about her missing neighbors. Standing on the sidewalk where she had stood on Christmas morning 1996, he felt a connection to both the mystery and the hope that had sustained his aunt until her death. Aunt Eleanor always believed they would come back, David told reporters. She used to say that love was stronger than whatever had taken them away, and that someday they would return to finish their Christmas celebration. Maybe she was right. As evening approached on December 16th, Chief Kim and his team maintained their vigil at 1247 Millbrook Lane. The Christmas tree continued to glow warmly through the bay window, and the presents beneath it continued their slow, hypnotic dance of rearrangement. Dr. Foster's electromagnetic readings had intensified throughout the day, suggesting that whatever force was powering the impossible Christmas scene was growing stronger as actual Christmas approached. Webb's paranormal detection equipment registered activity patterns that seemed to follow the rhythm of a family's daily routine. Peaks of energy in the morning, afternoon, and evening that corresponded to mealtimes and family gatherings. Most remarkably, the digital camera hidden among the Christmas presents had continued recording throughout the day, though its memory card should have filled up hours ago. Officer Chen monitored the camera's display and reported that it seemed to be documenting activities in the room even when no one was present. "I'm seeing movement on the camera's screen that doesn't correspond to anything we can observe directly," Chen reported. "It's as if the camera is recording events that are happening in the same space, but in a different reality." As December 16th turned into December 17th, Chief Kim made the decision to establish a permanent monitoring station across the street from the Henderson house. If the family was somehow celebrating Christmas in a parallel timeline, he wanted to document everything that happened during the final week leading up to Christmas Eve, the anniversary of their original disappearance. The question that haunted everyone involved in the investigation was simple, yet profound. If the Henderson family was alive and present in their house, celebrating Christmas 2024 as if they had never left, what would happen when their timeline reached December 24th? Would they disappear again, or would the two realities finally converge in a way that allowed them to return to the world they had left 28 years ago? The answer to that question would determine whether the Henderson family's story was a Christmas miracle, or the beginning of an even deeper mystery that challenged everything anyone thought they knew about the nature of time, reality, and the power of love to transcend the impossible. December 24th, 2024, Christmas Eve, arrived in Cedar Falls with the same gentle snowfall that had blessed the town 28 years earlier. By 6 a.m., Chief Kim and his investigation team had established their monitoring station across from 1247 Millbrook Lane, determined to document whatever extraordinary events might unfold on this anniversary date. The Christmas tree in the Henderson house had grown brighter throughout the week leading up to Christmas Eve. Dr. Foster's electromagnetic readings showed energy patterns that defied explanation, while Marcus Webb's paranormal equipment registered activity levels that peaked higher each day. Whatever force was sustaining the impossible Christmas scene was building towards something significant. At 7:15 a.m., Officer Chen reported the first visual confirmation of the Henderson family in 28 years. "Chief, you need to see this. There are people moving around inside the house." Through high-powered surveillance equipment, the investigation team could observe shadowy figures moving through the rooms of 1247 Millbrook Lane. The figures appeared translucent and flickered occasionally, like images on an old television with poor reception, but their movements corresponded perfectly to a family preparing for Christmas Eve. Dr. Sarah Martinez, a quantum physicist from Iowa State University, had joined the investigation team after Dr. Foster's initial findings suggested that the Henderson house was experiencing some kind of temporal anomaly. Dr. Martinez brought specialized equipment designed to detect dimensional fluctuations and time distortions. "What we're observing appears to be a convergence of parallel timelines," Dr. Martinez explained as she analyzed her readings. The Henderson family never actually disappeared in our traditional sense. They became trapped in a temporal loop that began on Christmas Eve 1996, and they've been living that same Christmas period repeatedly for 28 years. The theory was supported by evidence that had emerged throughout the week. Sarah's diary entries showed that while she was aware of the passage of time, her family was experiencing a continuous Christmas season that reset every few weeks. They aged normally within their timeline, but remained isolated from the outside world's progression. "Think of it like a snow globe," Dr. Martinez continued. "The Henderson family has been living inside their own perfect Christmas reality, complete and self-contained, while the rest of the world moved forward around them. What we're seeing now is that snow globe beginning to merge with our reality." At 9:30 a.m., the first direct communication occurred. Tommy Henderson, now appearing as a man in his 30s, but still possessing the enthusiastic spirit that neighbors remembered from 1996, somehow managed to use his photography equipment to project a message onto the bay window from inside the house. The words appeared backwards from the outside, clearly intended for people watching from the street. "We know you're there. We've been waiting." Chief Kim immediately ordered his team to attempt communication through various methods. They tried calling out through bullhorns, writing messages on large signs, and even using emergency vehicle lights to flash coded signals. The response came through Tommy's improvised projection system. "We can see you, but can't hear you. Tonight at 8:15 p.m., the same time we left, we'll try to come back." The implications were staggering. The Henderson family was not only aware of the outside world, but they had been conscious of their situation for years and had been working toward this moment when the timelines might converge enough for them to return. Margaret Henderson appeared at the kitchen window around noon, looking exactly as she would have aged naturally over 28 years. She held up a handwritten sign that read, "Thank you for never forgetting us. We love you all." The emotional impact on the assembled investigators, media, and community members was overwhelming. Mrs. Patterson's nephew, David, broke down in tears, while former Police Chief Morrison, despite his dementia, seemed to have perfect clarity about what was happening. "They're coming home," Morrison whispered repeatedly. "They're finally coming home for Christmas." Throughout the afternoon, more signs of preparation became visible inside the house. The Henderson family appeared to be gathering their belongings and making arrangements for what they hoped would be their return to the normal world. James was seen packing a suitcase, while Sarah organized papers and documents that had accumulated during their 28-year Christmas loop. Dr. Martinez's equipment detected increasing instability in the temporal field surrounding the house. The boundaries between the Henderson family's Christmas reality and the outside world were weakening, creating a window of opportunity that might allow them to step back into normal time. The convergence appears to be tied to the specific moment of their original disappearance, Dr. Martinez explained. At 8:15 p.m. on Christmas Eve, the temporal barriers will be at their weakest. If they're going to return, that's when it will happen. De Beige, Father Torres held a prayer vigil in the street, beginning at 7 p.m., with over 200 community members joining hands and offering prayers for the Henderson family's safe return. The scene was both beautiful and surreal, a crowd of people singing Christmas carols to a family trapped in time, hoping that love and faith might be enough to bring them home. At 8 p.m., the activity inside the house intensified dramatically. All the lights began flashing in synchronized patterns, while the Christmas tree seemed to grow even brighter. The presents beneath the tree, which had been slowly moving throughout the week, began spinning and rearranging themselves in complex geometric patterns. Dr. Foster's electromagnetic readings spiked beyond her equipment's ability to measure, while Dr. Martinez's temporal detection devices registered fluctuations that suggested reality itself was becoming unstable around 1247 Millbrook Lane. "Everyone needs to move back at least 50 feet, Dr. Martinez shouted over the growing electrical hum emanating from the house. "We don't know what kind of energy discharge might occur when the timelines merge." At 8:10 p.m., the Henderson family appeared together in the bay window, clearly visible for the first time in 28 years. They looked exactly as they should have aged. James, with grey hair and gentle lines around his eyes. Margaret, with the dignified beauty of a woman in her late 60s. Sarah, as a confident woman in her 40s. And Tommy, as a young man who had inherited his father's steady demeanor and his mother's warm smile. They waved to the crowd gathered in the street, and Sarah held up a final sign. "See you on the other side." And at exactly 8:15 p.m., the moment when the Henderson family had vanished on Christmas Eve 1996, a brilliant flash of light erupted from every window of the house at 1247 Millbrook Lane. The light was warm and golden, like concentrated Christmas morning sunshine, and it lasted for exactly 37 seconds. When it faded, the house appeared completely dark and empty once again. For a moment, the crowd stood in stunned silence, fearing that they had witnessed the Henderson family disappearing for a second time. Chief Kim and his officers rushed toward the house, prepared to find it as mysteriously vacant as it had been for the past 28 years. But as they reached the front door, it opened from the inside. James Henderson stepped onto the porch of his family's home, looking around at the crowd of strangers and familiar faces with wonder and gratitude. He appeared exactly as he should at 70 years of age, wearing the same clothes he had been wearing on Christmas Eve 1996, but aged and worn as if 28 years had passed. "We're back," he said simply, his voice carrying the emotion of nearly 3 decades of Christmas Eves spent hoping for this moment. Margaret emerged next, followed by Sarah and Tommy. They stood together on their front porch, a family reunited with the world they had never stopped loving, even when they couldn't reach it. The next few hours were a chaos of medical examinations, police interviews, and emotional reunions. Dr. Coleman, now 86 years old but still practicing medicine, confirmed that all 4 Henderson family members were in excellent health and showed signs of having aged normally over the past 28 years. Their stories, told separately and then together, provided the final pieces of the puzzle that had haunted Cedar Falls for nearly 3 decades. On Christmas Eve 1996, the Henderson family had indeed returned home from church and begun their traditional Christmas Eve celebration. They had opened their new pajamas and were preparing for bed when something extraordinary occurred. "We were sitting around the Christmas tree," Margaret explained to investigators. "I was reading 'Twas the Night Before Christmas to the children, just like always. James was adjusting the tree lights because one strand was flickering, and then suddenly, everything just stopped." The family found themselves trapped in what they initially thought was a dream or hallucination. Time seemed to move normally within their house, but the outside world became unreachable. They could see neighbors through their windows, but their neighbors couldn't see them. They could hear sounds from the street, but no one could hear them calling for help. "We tried everything," James said. "We tried to leave the house, but every door led back to the same rooms. We broke windows, but the glass would repair itself. We called 911, but our phones only played Christmas music." As days turned into weeks, the family realized they were living in some kind of temporal bubble. They aged normally and maintained their relationships with each other, but they were isolated from the progression of normal time. Most remarkably, they discovered they could access information about the outside world, newspapers, television, and eventually the internet, but only as observers. "We watched you all searching for us," Sarah explained, tears streaming down her face. "We saw the investigation, the media coverage, the theories about what had happened. We tried so many times to communicate, but we couldn't break through until recently." Tommy, now an accomplished photographer, even within their temporal prison, had spent years experimenting with ways to project images and messages to the outside world. His breakthrough had come only weeks earlier when he discovered that his camera equipment could somehow interface with the boundary between their reality and normal time. "I realized that the barrier was weakening as we approached the 28th anniversary, Tommy explained. "Whatever force had trapped us was tied to that specific Christmas Eve, and it was losing power as we got closer to completing the cycle." The family had spent the past month preparing for this moment, gathering their belongings and their courage for an attempt to return to normal time. They weren't certain it would work, but they were determined to try. "We never stopped believing that love would find a way," Margaret said, looking at the crowd of people who had welcomed them home. "We never stopped having faith that Christmas miracles were real." Dr. Martinez's analysis of the temporal event suggested that the Henderson family had been caught in what she termed a chronological eddy, a pocket of space-time that had become disconnected from normal temporal flow due to an extremely rare quantum fluctuation that occurred at the moment of their disappearance. "The probability of such an event is essentially zero," Dr. Martinez explained to the media. "But probability isn't the same as impossibility. What happened to the Henderson family represents a phenomenon that challenges our understanding of time and reality, but it's not supernatural. It's just incredibly, impossibly rare." The house at 1247 Millbrook Lane showed no signs of its 28-year temporal anomaly. Utilities functioned normally, and property inspections revealed nothing unusual about the structure or its systems. The Christmas tree and presents that had been visible for the past week had vanished completely, leaving only the memory of their impossible existence. The Henderson family faced the challenge of reintegrating into a world that had changed dramatically during their absence. Sarah, who had been 15 in 1996, now possessed the memories and experiences of a 43-year-old woman, but she had no official existence in the modern world. Tommy faced similar challenges as he tried to establish his identity as a 31-year-old man with no social security number, educational records, or employment history from the past 28 years. But the community of Cedar Falls rallied around their returned neighbors with overwhelming support. Local attorney Patricia Wells, who had been Margaret's teaching colleague in 1996, volunteered to help the family navigate the legal complexities of their situation. Dr. Coleman coordinated with specialists to ensure they received any medical care they might need after their temporal displacement. Perhaps most importantly, the Henderson family discovered that they weren't alone in their experience. Their return had inspired dozens of people to come forward with their own stories of temporal anomalies, missing time, and unexplained disappearances. While none were as dramatic as the Henderson case, the reports suggested that their experience might not be entirely unique. On Christmas morning 2024, exactly 28 years and one day after their disappearance, the Henderson family celebrated Christmas in their own home for the first time since 1996. They opened presents that had been waiting under their tree for nearly 3 decades, plus new gifts provided by generous community members who wanted to help them celebrate their incredible return. Margaret returned to teaching at Cedar Falls Elementary School, where she found that the principles of education hadn't changed as much as she had feared. Her experience in the temporal loop had given her unique insights into patience, persistence, and the importance of never giving up hope. James resumed his work as an insurance adjuster, though he had to complete extensive training to learn about changes in technology and regulations that had occurred during his absence. His attention to detail and methodical approach to investigation made him especially valuable in handling unusual or complex claims. Sarah enrolled at the University of Iowa to complete the college education that had been interrupted by her disappearance. She chose to major in theoretical physics, inspired by her family's experience and determined to help others who might face similar temporal anomalies. Tommy established himself as a professional photographer with a specialty in documenting unexplained phenomena and helping families preserve memories during difficult times. His unique perspective on the nature of time and the importance of capturing precious moments made his work particularly meaningful. The Henderson family's return became known as the Christmas Eve miracle, inspiring books, documentaries, and scientific research into the nature of time and reality. Their story offered hope to families dealing with unexplained disappearances and demonstrated the power of love to transcend even the boundaries of time itself. Dr. Martinez established the Henderson Institute for Temporal Studies at Iowa State University, dedicated to researching similar phenomena and providing support for individuals who might experience temporal displacement. The Institute's motto, suggested by Margaret Henderson, reads, "Love transcends time and hope makes all things possible." And every Christmas Eve since their return, the Henderson family holds an open house at 1247 Millbrook Lane, welcoming anyone who wants to share in their celebration of the miracle that brought them home. The event has become a beloved Cedar Falls tradition, attracting visitors from around the world who come to witness the power of faith, love, and the Christmas spirit. The case officially remains classified as resolved by extraordinary circumstances in the Cedar Falls Police Department files. Chief Kim, who grew up next door to the Henderson family and lived through both their disappearance and their return, often reflects on the profound impact their story has had on his understanding of what's truly possible in this world. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, Chief Kim often tells visitors who ask about the technical details of the Henderson family's temporal displacement. Some mysteries are meant to inspire us to believe in forces greater than ourselves, forces like love, hope, and the magic that still exists in this world if we're willing to look for it. On quiet Christmas Eves, when snow falls softly on Millbrook Lane and Christmas lights twinkle in every window, residents of Cedar Falls sometimes pause to look at the Henderson house and remember the family that vanished for 28 years and then returned home for Christmas. Their story serves as a reminder that some disappearances aren't forever, that some Christmas wishes do come true, and that love really can find a way to overcome impossible obstacles. In a world that often seems to have lost its sense of wonder, the Henderson family's return offers proof that miracles still happen, especially at Christmas, when the boundaries between the possible and impossible become as thin as the veil between one reality and another. The presents under their tree may have stopped moving, but the hope their story inspired continues to touch hearts around the world, reminding everyone that the greatest Christmas gifts aren't found under trees, but in the love that binds families together across time, space, and every obstacle the universe can create. And every Christmas Eve, when the Henderson family gathers around their tree to read "'Twas the Night Before Christmas," they remember to give thanks not just for their return, but for the 28 years of Christmas celebrations that kept their love alive during their impossible journey through time. The Christmas Eve Miracle of Cedar Falls proves that some stories don't end with disappearance or tragedy. Sometimes they end with coming home.